Hey everyone, I don't even know where to begin. I guess I should start by saying I never thought I'd be posting something like this. I always thought I had the perfect life. My name's Charles, I'm 32, and for the last 7 years, I've been married to Alicia. We live in a nice little suburb in Vermont. Quiet, peaceful, pretty standard stuff. I work as an insurance claims adjuster, and Alicia works as a nurse at the local hospital. We didn't have a lot of drama, no big fights, nothing like that. Hell, we even went to church together on Sundays. On the outside, we were one of those couples that everyone envied. I thought she was the one. You know, the kind of love that you think will last forever. People would always tell me how lucky I was to have a wife like Alicia. She was beautiful, smart, funny, just a really good person, or so I thought. We had our routines, like anyone else. I'd get home from work, we'd have dinner, maybe watch some shows, and talk about the stuff that happened during the day. It wasn't perfect, but it was comfortable. I honestly never doubted her. Never once. I trusted her completely. Big mistake, right? I guess everything started to unravel when my best friend Greg opened up to me about his own marriage. I'd known Greg since high school, and we were like brothers. He was the kind of guy who always kept things light, you know? We'd drink beers together, talk about sports, and joke about our problems. But one day, he hit me with this bombshell that turned everything upside down. Greg told me his wife, Sarah, had cheated on him. I was stunned. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd just throw around accusations. He was usually the one telling us to let it go when we complained about our wives. But here he was, shaking and upset, saying that Sarah had been seeing someone else behind his back. He didn't give me all the details, but it was clear that he was broken. And to be honest, it shook me more than I thought it would. It wasn't just that he was going through it, it made me start thinking. What if it could happen to me too? That thought kept nagging me. I mean, I had no reason to think Alicia would cheat on me, right? But what if I was missing something? The seed was planted, and I couldn't shake it. And that's when I started noticing little things. Things I hadn't paid attention to before. I tried not to read too much into it. But you know how it is. Once you start looking, you start seeing. So yeah, after Greg told me about Sarah, I started paying attention to Alicia in a way I hadn't before. It was subtle at first, like, she'd come home a little later than usual some nights. Nothing crazy, just an extra 15 to 20 minutes. She'd say she was staying late at work or something. But I knew her schedule pretty well, and I started wondering if it added up. Then there were the texts. She always had her phone on her, but I noticed she'd get real quick with the screen any time I walked into the room. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a work thing. But then I started catching little changes in her tone. Like when she'd talk about her day, she'd sound more distant, less engaged. It wasn't obvious, just a shift in her vibe, you know? I never questioned her outright. I trusted her. I wanted to believe nothing was off. But every time I had these little doubts, they wouldn't go away. It was like this nagging feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. One day, I had to go pick up a gift I had left at the sports center after a game of pickup basketball. I didn't have my phone on me, so I called Alicia to ask if she could bring it by later. She said she was too tired, but that she'd pick it up in the morning when she got off work. Cool, no problem. Well, later that evening, I realized I had left my other phone at the sports center. Don't ask why I have 2 phones, it's a work thing. Anyway, I needed to get it back, so I called the center and asked if they could check their security footage to see if I had left it somewhere. They said it'd take a few minutes to look. When I showed up the next day to retrieve it, they gave me the footage, and I went straight to the part where I had been earlier. I was half paying attention at first, trying to figure out where I might have set my phone down. But then, as I skipped ahead to the section where Alicia had come to pick up my stuff, something stopped me cold. Alicia wasn't alone. She was in the lobby, laughing and joking with 2 guys, Travis and Scott, who I knew worked there as swim instructors. They were hugging her, touching her, being way too friendly for just co-workers. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting, but as I watched the footage, it became clear this wasn't just some casual conversation. Alicia leaned in close to Travis, whispering something in his ear. Then, I saw her kiss him. A quick peck, but it was enough. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just being friendly, she was all over him. And then, as if that wasn't bad enough, Scott came over, and Alicia immediately shifted her attention to him. The way they were talking, flirty, laughing, I just knew. But it wasn't just what I saw. It was what I heard next. While they were talking, Alicia's voice came through loud and clear. She was talking about me. I can't believe he's still clueless. I swear, he's so weak. I could do anything, and he wouldn't even notice, she said, laughing. He's like a puppy dog, just follows me around like I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. The blood drained from my face. I felt like the ground was slipping out from under me. That moment, watching her make a fool of me on camera, calling me weak and clueless, was worse than the kiss. I felt humiliated, betrayed, not just by what she was doing, but by how she talked about me behind my back. Like I was some joke. I had no idea how long I sat there staring at that footage. It felt like hours. I wanted to scream, to confront her right then and there. But I knew I had to think this through. It wasn't just about what I saw. It was about what I didn't know yet. There had to be more to the story. So I just took a breath, shut off the footage, and left the center. But let me tell you, when I walked out of there, I felt like a different person. Like something in me had broken. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't over. I needed answers, and I was going to get them. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just hit you once. It lingers. It hangs there in your chest, like a weight that keeps growing heavier the more you think about it. For days, I just walked around in a daze, feeling like I was wearing someone else's skin. I couldn't even look at Alicia without wanting to scream, but I couldn't just blow up in the middle of dinner either. That's not who I was, and I wasn't about to make it easy for her to dismiss me as some crazy guy who just got too emotional. No, I needed to play this carefully. But at the same time, I needed to feel something. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and let this eat away at me. So, I started gathering information. I wasn't going to confront Alicia right away. I wasn't stupid enough to think she wouldn't try to talk her way out of it, or worse, try to play the victim. I wanted to know everything, and I needed proof. I spent hours at night just driving around, gathering details, asking questions about the guys involved, Travis and Scott. I went by the sports center a couple more times, casually. Tried to get a feel for their schedules, their habits. They were both younger than me, mid-20s, and they had that cocky, youthful energy that always rubbed me the wrong way. They were always hanging out together after their shifts, chatting, laughing, like nothing mattered. I watched them for a while from my car one night, just to see how they interacted. No doubt in my mind, they knew what was going on. They weren't just helping Alicia, they were in on it, enjoying it. The thought of those two guys with her made my blood boil. Then, I started looking into their personal lives. Travis was single, or at least he seemed to be. He posted a lot of gym selfies on Instagram. He was a typical bro type, big on working out, hitting the bar on weekends, and all that. Scott, though, was more elusive. He kept to himself mostly, but I found out he lived in a pretty crappy apartment on the outskirts of town. Not much, but it gave me a starting point. I wasn't about to make a move without being sure, but I was beginning to feel like I could take control of this. I didn't need to confront Alicia yet. I didn't need to talk to her about what I saw. Not yet. First, I needed to make sure I had a way to hit back hard. And that's when I started thinking of how I was going to get revenge. I wasn't just mad, I was humiliated. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wanted them to feel it, to understand the depth of what they did. But I also wanted to make sure they'd never forget it. I spent the next few days scouring the internet. I made calls, talked to people I knew, and pieced together plans. I figured out the perfect way to get to them, something that wouldn't tie back to me, but would hit them where it hurt. I wasn't thinking about forgiveness. Hell, I wasn't even thinking about how Alicia would react. I had no interest in begging her for answers or giving her a chance to explain herself. She had already shown me what she was. Now it was time to show her what I was capable of. The day I finally decided to make my move, I felt a strange calm. Like I had everything under control. I knew what I was about to do would change things forever, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had power again. I wasn't going to be the guy she laughed at anymore. I was going to make sure she never forgot who I was. And that meant making Travis and Scott remember me too. Alright, so here's where things started getting real. Once I had all my ducks in a row, I knew I couldn't hesitate. Hesitation would only make me second-guess myself, and I wasn't about to let that happen. The plan was simple, too simple really, but it needed to be. I didn't want anything messy, no loose ends, no chances of getting caught. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like this was the only way to take control of a situation that had gotten way out of hand. I kept telling myself that this wasn't just about Alicia anymore. This was about making sure that Travis and Scott paid for what they did. So one night, just after midnight, I pulled up to the sports center parking lot. I made sure my car was parked far enough from the entrance so no one would get a good look at it. Then I got out, slipped on a mask I had bought earlier that week, and checked my gear: gloves, untraceable gun, and a silencer. I'd been practicing with that gun for days, making sure I could move fast and quiet. It wasn't something I wanted to use, but I wasn't about to leave anything to chance. Now, the tricky part was waiting. I knew their usual hangout spots. Travis and Scott were creatures of habit. They often stayed behind after their shifts, talking in the parking lot or hitting up a nearby diner. That night, I saw them through the big glass windows of the sports center, chatting and laughing, just like I'd seen them on that security footage. They didn't know I was there. They didn't even see me. I waited. About 20 minutes later, the two of them walked out together, talking about some girl they were both eyeing at the bar. They didn't see me. Didn't hear me coming up behind them. I stepped forward quietly, keeping to the shadows, and in an instant, I had them both in my sights. I didn't even hesitate. I pulled the trigger twice, each shot aimed at their legs. Both men collapsed instantly, howling in pain. I could hear Scott's voice, high-pitched, cursing me as he clutched his thigh. Travis didn't say anything. He just screamed, his hands clutching his knee. I felt a weird, cold satisfaction watching them writhe on the ground. But I didn't want them dead. Not yet. I needed them to suffer but not die. That would have been too clean. Too easy. I wanted them to live with it. I made sure they knew who'd done it, even though they couldn't see my face. "You'll never forget this, will you?" I said, my voice low, masked, as I stood over them. Neither of them could move much. They just glared up at me, their faces twisted in pain and confusion. But I wasn't interested in their reaction. I wasn't interested in talking to them. I'd already made my point. I took a step back, turned, and walked away without a sound. The entire thing took less than 5 minutes. I'd made sure the shots were clean and quick. No risk of them being fatal, but they'd remember this night forever. The two of them would walk with limp legs for the rest of their lives, something to remind them of their betrayal, something that would always be there, no matter how much they tried to forget. As I drove away, the adrenaline started to wear off, and a sick feeling crept up on me. I didn't want to think about what I'd just done. I didn't want to consider whether or not I'd gone too far. But I knew one thing for sure: it felt good. It felt like the control I'd lost when I found out about Alicia's affair had been put back in my hands. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was calling the shots again. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What was done. And I wasn't finished yet. Alicia had no idea what was coming. It's weird, but after the ambush, I didn't feel the rush of guilt I expected. I thought maybe I'd break down, second-guess everything, feel sick to my stomach over what I'd done. But no, I didn't. For once, I felt like I had control over something in my life. The next few days were a blur. I didn't want to waste time thinking about how I felt. I had more important things to focus on. Like Alicia. I knew she'd start picking up on something being off sooner or later. I just didn't know how she'd react or how much she knew, but she was definitely starting to sense that something was changing. She kept asking me, "Is everything okay? You seem distant," like she didn't already know what I'd seen. Like she didn't know I knew exactly what she'd been up to. It was almost too easy to play her. I didn't give her much. Just little things here and there. A comment here, a cold shoulder there. I wasn't outright rude, but I wasn't exactly warm either. I wanted her to start feeling the tension, to wonder if I was going to snap. I kept watching her closely, trying to gauge her reactions. She started acting weird, like she was walking on eggshells. Not that she was acting guilty, no. She was way too smug for that. But I could tell she was nervous, like she was trying to stay a step ahead of me. Every time I glanced at her, she'd quickly look away, like she was trying to hide something. The real turning point came one morning when I noticed her phone sitting on the kitchen counter. It buzzed, Just a simple text message, but something about the timing made me pause. She'd left the room to get something from upstairs, and that phone was wide open. Normally, I wouldn't have snooped. I trusted her. But after everything, I felt like I had every right to know what she was hiding. I picked it up. The message wasn't from a friend or family. It was from Travis. It just said, "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Miss you." My blood ran cold. I knew what that meant, and it confirmed everything. She was still seeing him. Hell, she was still seeing both of them. I didn't need to read any more, I just put the phone down. I already knew what I needed to know. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to confront her right then. No. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of making it easy. Instead, I played it cool. I waited. I let her sweat. I let her think she still had control over me. It was starting to feel like the longer I kept up this act, the more her guilt and fear started creeping in. Alicia was smart, but she wasn't as smart as she thought she was. I could see the cracks forming. The hesitation in her eyes when she looked at me. The way she'd start reaching for her phone any time she left the room. She knew something was coming, but she didn't know what. And that was the beauty of it. I wasn't going to rush this. I was going to let her marinate in that fear for a while. Let her wonder if I knew, when I knew how I knew. I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to make her come to me. Make her squirm and beg for the truth to come out. But in the back of my mind, I knew I was playing a dangerous game. I couldn't afford to let her think she had the upper hand for too long. I had to stay one step ahead, keep my mask on, and stay focused. Soon enough, she'd have to face the consequences. And when she did, I was going to make sure she felt the full weight of everything she'd done. But first, I had a bigger problem to deal with. Travis and Scott. They were still out there, walking around, living their lives like nothing happened. I wasn't done with them yet. It didn't take long for Alicia to start acting more like herself again, but with a noticeable edge. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things, but the way she started glancing over her shoulder when she thought I wasn't paying attention, like she was looking for an escape route, was too obvious to ignore. The silence between us grew heavier. I could feel her trying to keep things normal, but it was like the walls between us had grown 10 feet high. Everything felt off, like we were both playing a part in some unspoken drama, but I wasn't the one pretending anymore. She was. Then, a few days after I picked up on her phone messages, I noticed something that made the whole situation crack. It was subtle, but it was enough for me to know I was on the right path. She came home from work later than usual one evening, again, nothing out of the ordinary. But this time, she seemed more tense. I could feel it in the way she moved, the way she avoided looking at me. It was a minor thing, but I knew her better than anyone. Something was wrong. She walked past me without saying much, just giving me a quick hey and heading straight for the kitchen. That's when I saw it. She dropped her bag on the counter like she always did, but this time, her phone was face up, a message blinking on the screen. I didn't even have to look for it. Alicia hadn't locked her phone. And that message, it was from Travis again. I didn't need to read it to know it was him. The heart emoji gave it away. But what really got me was this. She picked up the phone, saw the message, and her face completely changed. She froze. For just a second, her eyes flicked toward me, like she was trying to see if I'd noticed. Her face turned pale, then flushed. She fumbled with the phone, muttering something under her breath about being busy, and then quickly locked it. That was the moment she knew. She knew I knew. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She could feel the shift in the air. I could almost hear her heart pounding in her chest. She stayed in the kitchen, pretending to make dinner, but I could tell she was stalling. Trying to think of something to say. To cover up the inevitable. I didn't let her have that luxury. I didn't want her to get comfortable enough to lie her way out of this. Finally, after a couple of minutes of unbearable silence, I walked up to her, calm as anything, and said, "You know, you're really starting to think I'm stupid, don't you?" She froze again. Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, so hard her knuckles turned white. But she didn't answer. She just kept her eyes glued to the counter, pretending she hadn't heard me. I pushed her again. "Is this really how you want to do this? Or do you think I'm just going to pretend I didn't see the texts? Pretend I don't know about Travis?" The tension in the room was suffocating. She didn't respond for a while. But I could feel her brain scrambling, trying to come up with the perfect excuse, the perfect lie. I could see her mouth open, then close again, like she was trying to figure out what words could save her. Finally she said, Charles, please. I didn't mean for it to happen. I swear. I looked at her, dead in the eyes. Don't give me that. Don't act like I don't know what's been going on. I've seen everything. I heard everything. Her face drained of color. She looked like I'd slapped her, like I'd just taken her world and shattered it. For a second, I almost felt bad. Almost. But that was when the mask came off. She started crying. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It just happened, she said, choking on her words. I didn't let her finish. Don't give me that. You were laughing about me. Talking about how weak I was. Talking about how I wouldn't even notice. You called me a joke, Alicia. She stammered, but the tears kept coming. It wasn't like that. I saw the footage, Alicia, I interrupted. I saw you with them. I saw how you kissed him. I saw the way you and Scott were laughing about it. About me. You humiliated me. Her hands were shaking now. Her face twisted in panic, but she still tried to salvage the situation. I never wanted to hurt you like this, Charles. It was just a mistake. I swear. I don't know what happened. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't listening anymore. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need to hear her tell me she was sorry or how much she regretted it. I was past that. The truth was, Alicia had already shown me who she was. And now, it was time for her to face the consequences. I let her ramble on for a few more minutes, but I barely heard her. I was already thinking ahead, playing out the next step in my head. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this. I wasn't going to let her slide by with a few tears and some hollow apologies. Her fear was palpable now. She could see it in my eyes. She knew I wasn't buying any of it. And I knew she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, the calm I'd been showing wasn't about forgiveness. It was about something far worse. I was done with her. I was done with her lies. And I was definitely done with her affair. But there was still one more thing to do. One last piece of the puzzle. And that was the moment I decided it was time to let her know what I had done. She wasn't going to get away with this. Not now, not ever. I could see the panic in Alicia's eyes. She was trying to process the fact that I just caught her, really caught her. She had that look people get when they know they've run out of lies to tell. But instead of breaking down or begging me to forgive her, she did something I wasn't expecting. She shut down. Her eyes went cold. Her expression hardened. It was like she flicked a switch, and in that moment, I realized how little I really knew her. She took a shaky breath, wiped the tears from her cheeks, and said, "You're not going to do anything crazy, are you, Charles? I mean, I'm still your wife, right?" That sentence, coming from her, was like a slap. As if her betrayal was something that could be explained away with a few tears, and "I'm sorry." As if she could still hold onto some sort of power over me just because we'd been married for 7 years. Her tone, though, it was different now. Less desperate, more calculating. Like she knew the jig was up, but she wasn't going down without a fight. And that's when I knew what she was thinking. She was starting to put 2 and 2 together. Alicia had figured out that I was playing her, that I'd been planning something, and she was getting nervous about what that might mean for her. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her. And then slowly, I gave her a small smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't a "we can talk this out" smile. No, it was the kind of smile you give someone when they realize the game has changed, and they're no longer in control. "I'm not gonna do anything crazy, Alicia," I said, leaning against the doorframe, my voice low. "But you're right. You are still my wife." Her face relaxed, just a little, like she thought she was out of the woods. Like maybe I wasn't going to make things worse. But then I dropped the bomb. "Travis and Scott? Yeah, I know what you've been doing with them. But you want to know what's really funny?" I walked a little closer to her, watching her try to hide her anxiety behind that fake mask of confidence. "You think you can just walk away from this without consequences. But you can't. Not anymore." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear. "What are you talking about, Charles?" I didn't answer her right away. I didn't have to. I'd already made my point. She could see it on my face. I wasn't the man she thought I was anymore. The person she could manipulate, the fool she could keep around, acting like everything was fine while she was out there with them. No, I said slowly, still staring at her. You've crossed a line, Alicia. And I'm done being the guy you can just walk all over. You think you've got it all figured out, that you can just tear everything down and still get away with it. But you won't. You're not the one in control anymore. I am. Her breath caught. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was trying to process what I was saying, trying to figure out how much I really knew what I was planning. She didn't even get a chance to respond. By the way, I added casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world, I took care of Travis and Scott. You don't have to worry about them anymore. Her face went white. She staggered back, her hands reaching for something to steady herself on, like the floor might just fall out from under her. She had a wild, panicked look in her eyes, the kind of look that comes when someone realizes their world is about to shatter. Charles, she whispered, barely able to form the words. What did you do? I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. I didn't even look away. I stayed steady, cold. I made sure they wouldn't walk again. You don't have to worry about them coming after you. Or me. Her entire body seemed to collapse at the words. She sank into the kitchen chair, her face a mask of disbelief, like she couldn't fathom what I'd just said. She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper, shaking. You hurt them? You actually did something? Charles, what the hell is wrong with you? And just like that, I saw the final piece of the puzzle fall into place. The real Alicia was showing through now. The panic, the fear, the self-preservation instinct kicking in. She didn't care about what she'd done to me, what she had done to us. All she cared about was herself. I let the silence stretch between us, just long enough for the gravity of what I'd said to sink in. And then I spoke again. I didn't hurt them, Alicia. I made sure they'd never walk again. That's the difference. That's what you don't understand. She was shaking her head now, her voice growing more frantic. You don't get it, Charles. You're going too far. You can't just do this. You can't take everything and... I stepped forward, my voice cold, cutting her off. I'm not taking anything, Alicia. You already took everything. You took my trust, my respect, and you threw it away. Now I'm just making sure you never forget what that feels like. What betrayal feels like. She opened her mouth, probably to beg, probably to offer some last-ditch plea for mercy, but I didn't give her the chance. I want you gone by tomorrow, I said flatly. Pack your things. Leave. I'm done. And if you think for 1 second I'm going to forgive you or let you off the hook for what you've done, you're wrong. She stared at me, eyes wide, her chest heaving with disbelief. She looked like she was about to say something, but then stopped herself. She was calculating, trying to figure out what kind of man she was dealing with now. But I wasn't the same guy she married. And when she finally turned away from me, tears streaming down her face, I felt nothing. Not 1 ounce of sympathy. Not a single shred of regret. I had taken control. And in that moment, I realized that everything I'd done, everything I'd planned, had led me here. Now, it was time for her to face the consequences of her actions. But this time, I wasn't going to let her off easy. The next day, Alicia didn't fight me. Not like I expected. She didn't yell, she didn't beg, and she didn't try to pull some emotional stunt to make me feel guilty. She packed her things quietly, almost mechanically, as if she'd already resigned herself to what was happening. I couldn't decide whether I felt relief or disgust. On one hand, part of me was glad she wasn't putting up a fight, it made things easier for me. But on the other hand, the way she just accepted everything without any real confrontation, it was unsettling. As she packed up, she made a couple of attempts to talk, but it was all weak, half-hearted stuff. I never meant to hurt you, Charles, she said once, her voice small and trembling. I really didn't. Please understand that. I didn't respond. She didn't deserve my understanding. Not after what she did. So I stayed silent, focusing on the task at hand, getting her out of my life. A few hours later, Alicia was ready to leave. She was standing by the front door, her suitcase at her feet. I hadn't said anything to her in the last hour. I just let her stew in her own silence, knowing that the hardest part for her was probably realizing that the life she'd built with me was over. I finally looked at her, and when our eyes met, there was no emotion left. No love, no anger, just nothing. She wasn't my Alicia anymore. She was a stranger who happened to be wearing the face of the woman I thought I married. "You know, you could have just told me," I said flatly. "Instead of playing me for a fool." Her face twitched, like she was going to cry again, but she stopped herself. She was probably running out of tears, anyway. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "And yet you did," I replied, cutting her off. "You destroyed everything." For a second, I thought maybe she was going to snap. Maybe she'd try to turn things around, maybe throw in a final attempt at saving herself. But no. She just nodded, like she finally accepted it all. "I'll send for the rest of my things later," she said, her voice barely audible now. She picked up her suitcase and headed for the door. I watched her leave, not feeling anything. I wasn't relieved or sad. Just empty. I didn't even watch her drive away. I didn't need to. Once she was gone, I stood in the doorway for a while, letting the weight of it all settle in. For 7 years, Alicia was everything to me. And now, she was nothing. But even though the house felt quieter, emptier, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite finished. Not yet. There was still one part of this whole thing that I hadn't dealt with. Travis and Scott. I didn't do what I did to them for Alicia. No, that wasn't it. I did it for me. For the humiliation they put me through, for making me question everything I thought I knew about trust, about loyalty. But I wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. The attack had been necessary, sure. But I wanted them to know who had done it. I wanted them to feel the consequences of their actions. I needed them to understand that the same way they destroyed my life, I was going to make sure they would never forget this night. They didn't deserve to walk away unscathed. So, after Alicia left, I went into the garage and started planning the next phase. I had to tie up the loose ends, make sure nothing pointed back to me, but also make sure Travis and Scott knew they'd been marked. I wasn't just some victim here. I wasn't going to let them go back to their normal lives like nothing happened. They had to pay. But this time, I was going to do it in a way that would leave them haunted, make sure they never forgot who they had crossed. Alicia had no idea what was coming. And I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of being the one to see it. But Travis and Scott? They would get the full story. They were going to remember me. And if they thought this was the end, they were wrong. This was only the beginning. I was done being the fool. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of cold efficiency. I didn't let myself feel much of anything, because feeling things just made me weaker. It was like my whole life had been a series of moves and countermoves, and now that I'd finally taken control, I wasn't about to let go of it. After Alicia left, the house felt strange, like it wasn't mine anymore. I wandered through the empty rooms, hearing only the creak of the floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. It was like all the warmth had been sucked out of it. I hadn't realized how much she'd been a part of the fabric of my daily life until she was gone. And now that she was gone, I didn't know what I was supposed to do with all this space. All this nothing. But one thing I did know, Travis and Scott were next. I had let the whole thing simmer for long enough. I had to finish this. I had to make sure they knew that betraying me came with a price they weren't going to pay off in just a few months of rehab. I spent a few days in the background, laying the groundwork. I didn't want them to think it was just a random act of violence. I wanted them to understand that they'd been marked. That this wasn't something they could just shake off and forget. I made sure the police had no leads. I'd done my homework. There was no evidence tying me to them, no prints, no cameras, nothing that could be traced back to me. They were stuck with their injuries, their story, and nothing more. But that wasn't enough. I needed them to know it wasn't just about what I'd done, it was about what I could do. And they needed to be terrified of that. I took a trip out of town, rented a place just far enough away from my usual life. I needed to get in the right headspace, away from the distractions of normality. The weeks leading up to that trip had been an emotional roller coaster. One moment I'd feel a little regret, like I'd gone too far. The next I'd feel a sharp, cold satisfaction, like I was finally in control of my own life again. But by the time I left Vermont, I knew what I was doing was just the beginning. I found Travis and Scott's addresses. They didn't live in the same neighborhoods as me. They lived in rougher areas, places where people didn't ask questions, and the only thing that mattered was getting by. They thought they were untouchable, living in their little bubble where no one cared who they slept with or what kind of trouble they caused. They thought they could live the rest of their lives without any consequences for what they'd done. They were wrong. The night I planned to visit them, I drove my car into a nondescript neighborhood in the middle of nowhere, parked it a couple blocks away, and walked the rest of the way. I made sure to dress in black, nothing too conspicuous, just a regular hoodie and jeans. The less I stood out, the better. The last thing I wanted was attention. I approached Travis's apartment first. He was the one who'd kissed Alicia first, the one who'd been the most aggressive with her. I could hear the faint sound of music playing inside, probably some club mix or whatever it was the kids were into these days. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I slipped a piece of paper under his door, the kind of paper that looked official, like it came from the state or someone important. I knew he'd open it out of curiosity. The note read, "You've been warned. There's nowhere to hide. I know who you are, and I know what you did. You think you got away with it? You haven't. This is just the beginning." I didn't sign it, of course. I didn't need to. The message would be clear enough. I moved on to Scott's place next. His apartment was smaller, quieter, more rundown. I wasn't expecting to see him, and I didn't. But I still left my mark. Same method, different note. I didn't care about whether they took it seriously or not. The point was they'd both get the message. They'd start looking over their shoulders. And when they did, they'd realize that the world they thought they lived in, where nothing had consequences, was about to come crashing down. By the time I left the area, I felt a twisted satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about hurting them just for the sake of hurting them. No, this was about sending a message. A permanent message. One that would make them look over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Back at the rental house, I sat down on the couch, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in weeks, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't rage. It was something else, something colder. I felt like I was finally letting go of the past. And I didn't miss it. Alicia was gone. Travis and Scott had been put in their place. And I was finally free. But freedom, I realized, wasn't what I'd thought it would be. It was darker. It was lonelier. And it was permanent. I couldn't turn back. And I didn't want to. A few weeks passed, and I barely heard from anyone. Alicia didn't reach out, probably because she knew there was nothing left to say. The other two? Silence. Nothing from Travis or Scott. Not a whisper. I checked in once or twice, just enough to confirm that they were still around, still alive, still hurting. The leg injuries had kept them both sidelined for a while, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that they knew. And every time I thought about them, I imagined them looking over their shoulders, wondering when the next shoe would drop. The weird thing is, though, as the days dragged on, the satisfaction started to fade. It wasn't like I expected a trophy or a reward. It was just hollow. Every time I'd look in the mirror, I'd see myself and realize that I wasn't just a guy who'd been wronged anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was the one who had changed. Who had become something else entirely. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about me becoming someone I didn't even recognize. Alicia's absence didn't sting anymore. And I felt no satisfaction from watching Travis and Scott suffer. I realized I'd become something I never wanted to be, cold. Maybe I'd won the battle, but I'd lost the war. I lost who I was. And now I was left with nothing but a memory of what I used to be, and a future I couldn't even imagine anymore. It's been a few months now, and the quiet is deafening. No more phone calls, no more drama, just this emptiness that follows me around. I never really knew how much I needed closure until I didn't get it. Alicia's gone. Travis and Scott are broken, scared, and probably wishing they'd never met me. But what do I have left? There's no satisfaction anymore. No victory. Just the echo of the choices I made. I look around sometimes and wonder if this is what I wanted, this life without any noise, without any ties. The sad truth? I don't know who I am anymore. I killed the person I used to be in the name of revenge. And now, all that's left is this hollow shell. It started creeping in, bit by bit, like a slow burn I couldn't put out. The emptiness wasn't just a void anymore, it was a weight I couldn't shake. I thought I could handle it. Thought I could move on and never look back. But the truth is, It never goes away. Every night, when I lie in bed, I hear it. The quiet whisper of what have you done? I killed any part of myself that could have felt good about this. About any of it. And I can't stop replaying those moments. The moments when I thought I was in control, when I thought I was making things right. But was it right? Was any of it? I don't think I'll ever know. I just know that I'm different now. And the worst part? I can't even bring myself to care. I guess I didn't expect it to hit me like this. I always thought once I got what I wanted, once I made sure they knew who was in charge, I'd feel better. I'd feel free. But instead I just feel tired. Like I'm carrying something heavy, but there's no clear way to put it down. It's been months since Alicia left. Months since I left behind everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and even who I was. In a way, the silence has been comforting. The phone doesn't ring anymore. There's no drama, no anger, no crying, no shouting. But it's not peaceful. It's just empty. I thought I'd be able to fill that emptiness with the satisfaction of revenge, of having my control back. But it doesn't work like that. I used to think I was a man of action, of purpose. I deal with things head-on, confront them, and move forward. But now? I don't know what I'm moving toward. Every decision I made was so focused on getting back at them, getting back at her, that I forgot to think about what happens next. And now I'm stuck in this limbo, just existing. I caught myself looking at old pictures of Alicia the other day. She looked so happy, so innocent, back when things were good. I remember those days. I remember thinking nothing could ever break us. And then one day it all shattered, her lies, my trust, everything. I guess that's why I did what I did. I wanted to make sure I wasn't the fool anymore. But now, when I look at those pictures, all I see is a man who couldn't even protect his own heart. I thought I could move on, but now every step I take feels like a mistake. I didn't just lose Alicia, I lost myself. I wanted vengeance, but what did I really get? Some quiet, some distance, and a lot of regret. I thought hurting Travis and Scott would make me feel powerful. Instead, I feel like I've only built my own prison. I haven't talked to Greg in a while. I've been keeping to myself. Don't even know if he knows what happened with Alicia. It doesn't matter. Everyone's gone now. They're all better off without me. I keep asking myself if I'll ever feel whole again. But if I'm honest, I don't know if that's even possible anymore. All the rage, all the planning, all the cold, calculated moves, it didn't give me back what I lost. It just took more from me. So here I am. Alone. Empty. Trying to figure out who I am after all of this. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to find the answer. I've spent so much time thinking revenge would fix everything. I thought it would give me some kind of peace, some closure. But here I am, months later, realizing the truth, it didn't fix anything. It just left me with more emptiness. I thought hurting Travis and Scott would make me feel in control, like I'd gotten justice. But the truth is, it only made me lose more of myself. Revenge doesn't heal wounds. It just burns everything down. And when the fire's gone, all that's left are the ashes. I don't recognize the man I've become. The anger, the planning, the coldness. It took me somewhere I didn't want to go. I've hurt people, sure. But I've hurt myself the most. I've destroyed the parts of me that used to care, used to feel. Now I'm just here. Alone. Empty. Maybe this is all I'm meant to be now. A shell of the person I once was. The worst part? I'm not sure I can fix it. I don't even know if I want to.